Hello, Sarah. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is ours, and definitively, this is in anticipation of the May 13th event that's forthcoming around rethinking women's leadership, with, of course, the Women Business Collaborative and Andy Simon. And of all the names I know, one name bubbles up to the top pretty quickly, and that is Sarah Robertson. So thank you for making the time.
Thank you, Sai.
It's tremendous to have you. I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell the world who you are, and we'll dive in.
Yeah, all right. So obviously, I'm Sara Robertson. I am the founder of an organization known as Lime Horse. So I focus on professional development in for individuals in high performing environments. I have some focus on the legal profession. I also wear a few other hats. I've been running a program through University of Toronto in mindfulness and peak performance and have an advisory board spot there that's been going on for about 5 years now. Also, chair of the local chapter of the Mindfulness and Law Society, a few other things going on. I've had some opportunity to work with professional athletes through the NHL and AHL team here. I'm going to be working with our Olympic team as well. So my focus is really on taking individuals and helping them reframe or frame their work and their performance in a way that is going to be effective and relevant as our world is changing as rapidly, in particular, as it has been in the last 16 months or so.
Definitely. Definitely. And definitely as you kind of see that unfolding and have, as we've all been on that journey, what are the kinds of things that are grabbing you around leadership and around just all the dynamics that we're going through?
Well, I mean, a lot of things I'm looking at, I'll reflect it back onto, my experience. I came from having a corporate leadership background and then going into starting my own business. I mean, some of that was out of interest of having my own business, but a lot of it was around the way that the workplace model didn't suit having the way that I wanted to be engaging with the world, as far as being able to balance the responsibilities of home and work and the expectations around that. And I'm, seeing more and more as we're moving into what this is sort of this fourth industrial revolution and the changes in demographics in the workplace, that this has sort of been bubbling up for some time. When I'm seeing these things, I mean, just to give it like a couple of examples, they say, women tend to, on average, so everything, I'm stating here, as I'm going to say, is on average, because there's always exceptions, but women on average tend to carry carry most of the caregiver tasks, whether that's elderly parents or children or the home, as well as at the same time trying to engage in the workplace. And I think it's something like 2 times as many women are willing to sacrifice their careers for caregiving duties traditionally than there are men. But you and I have had discussions about this in the past around, what's happening with the, boomer generation retiring and the talent vacuum that's coming and digitization and how that impacts businesses and being able to be competitive in these economies. And some interesting things that have happened over the pandemic is something I think it's like female startups have doubled in this time. And so I think what we're seeing is the pandemic has definitely highlighted how the caregiving duties impact women's ability to engage in the workplaces as they've been set up, say around, more second industrial revolution, and that's started changing, I think, around the digital revolution, around the third one, but hasn't really kind of gotten there yet. And that, the way that workplaces have been organized is really actually kind of in conflict with being able to meet those duties. And so I think the pandemic has really highlighted the conflict there, but also accelerated the move to remote workplaces, the ability to be able, whether it's work from anywhere or moving much more towards what I think is going to be the really big change is for everyone is in this self-determined flexible working, where we're getting away from this idea of, clock punching, or which I think that's just, frankly, I think that's going to disappear to a degree. There will probably always be industries where there's some aspect of that, but particularly in the digital economy, that we're just going to move straight away from people like any kind of clock punching, that it's going to be much more based around output and deliverables, as opposed to time equaling wages, which I think is a really, really exciting thing for women, because it is a matter of being able to have that determination over time and flexibility that allows for integrating a lot of these other duties that have traditionally fell onto women. I think when I speak about what's good for women, we also end up talking about other underrepresented groups as well. Mm-hmm. And I think overall will be positive for men too. So when we're talking about, female leadership or women, it's more moving from, I don't want to be anti-men. That's not the point. It's more saying like moving from a workplace structure that is traditionally had been better suited to men to something that is more human-based and better suited to all. And it's going to remove barriers that are beneficial to organizations as well, because as you and I have discussed, if you can have all of the diversity and inclusion initiatives in HR in the world, but if you have a workplace structure that just inherently creates barriers, whether that's around location or needing to be in an office or time and workspace, like you're going to, you can say, oh, we want to hire more women, but if you have a workplace that has barriers to that, then a desire to hire more, or trying to increase that even in sort of like a quota-based or affirmative action-based thing isn't really going to work.
Yeah.
And let me go. I'll throw in one last thought on this, and then I have.
Your thinking is so rich. You're brilliant, my friend.
I have a feeling you want to ask me a question, but I think like we get closer to a meritocracy by implementing these sorts of things, because like right now we're saying, oh, the best person for the job, but it's really, oh, the best person for the job that's able to work within this established structure. And so organizations that are able to move more to a self-determined model are going to be able to attract like the best minds overall, regardless of gender or demographic or location, rather than saying like, oh, well, we'll get the people who are the best that happen to be in this in this location and able to attend during these certain hours, and having these, so removing those sort of physical structural barriers, I think is going to it's going to move towards creating that sort of meritocracy that we're looking for, where we really are getting people that are best suited for the job, regardless of whatever other kinds of identifications you want to apply to them. And I think I think the thing that's going to be exciting about this too is it's mentioned, like, as we see the boomer generation leaving, and it's sort of organically, we know that more than 50% of university graduates are female. There's a much higher proportion of other underrepresented groups, traditionally underrepresented groups, that are coming up and graduating. And so I feel like we're at this spot where it's like we can just, if we get out of our own way, that we're going to end up having that transition into workplace diversity and opportunity that we've kind of been trying to, I think, organize within the model that exists. And I think what we're seeing too and as I mentioned on, this increase in women accelerating, their startups is, one of the things about having the digital economy is it's easier to start a business than it's ever been. And so rather than the kind of more traditional women's lib initiatives that have been like, oh, well, how do we get a seat at the table? Women are just saying like, oh, forget that. Like, I don't need a seat at that table. I'm just going to set my own table because that table is becoming irrelevant in the long term anyhow.
You're quite brilliant. A very rich rendition, if you will, of the thinking. So thank you so much for that. I want to tease a few things out and kind of have you sort of guide us a little bit. The whole notion of self-determined and self-determination, individually and collectively as organizations, is definitively a bit of a paradigm shift for organizations, right, to embrace. It's and I want to kind of sort of go down two threads. One is self-determination, as you've described it, very much tied to mindfulness and awareness. And one question that comes to my mind, Sarah, are leaders aware enough? Are they mindful enough to really begin to manifest individually and collectively and help manifest that self-determination? That's one aspect. And then I want to kind of bear with me, if you will. The other aspect of it, that comes to my that respectfully is exactly as you mentioned. It's not a question of bashing males or females or what have you. It is truly an integration of a greater whole that's better. That's more than the sum of its parts.
Right.
So I would love for you to kind of talk, please, around all those pieces.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of, like you said, it's not about tearing down the establishment and, this kind of whatever. Sometimes you get into things where people are like, oh, we need a violent revolution. And I don't think that that's the case. I think we just need a lot of people building a better model and then allowing it to self-select.
Yeah.
People are going to naturally move towards things that, better suit the way that they're looking to work. Do I think that leaders are aware enough? I don't know. I think some are. I think the ones that are going to, this one of the things about working from home is you get pets that come and hang out with you.
All good.
I think what you're going to see is that the ones that are embracing that are going to thrive moving forward. And you're saying, I know, like, some of where I think this is starting to get a little messy right now and needs to be sussed out in this transition is, we're moving to remote work models, but still expecting people to be online X number of hours and in these meetings. And, if you've, been in an office workplace, I think it's safe to say that there is a significant amount of time that is not terribly productive. And I think we're in this transition now where we're trying to kind of like move that model online. And there needs to be at some point a shift where we're just like telling people what they need to do and letting them do that. And my question is like, rather than spending a bunch of time trying to monitor your employees, like, it would make more sense to me to move to a mindset where you're hiring people that you can trust to do the work that you want them to do.
That's very, very powerful, because you've introduced a few key words. I mean, it is a transition. There is a shift, and we can't apply respectfully an old paradigm to a new world. It is a different paradigm that we have to really look at the world with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the idea is kind of like, trying to, I heard an example this way once about the transition thing and saying like, sometimes you just have to rethink a whole new model. It would be like trying to, apply the designs of train stations to airports, which they're both modes of transportation, but they're just so remarkably different that it becomes obvious that, how the original model that you would have used to design a train station just straight up doesn't apply to an airport. And that's okay. And sometimes it's going to take, trying to take something from the old model and try it on the new one to just realize like, okay, no, we've got to come up with something completely different here. So it's not necessarily going to be a smooth transition. I think we're seeing that now as, the pandemic has really forced organizations forward into this different model, and they're trying to cling to some of the old structure, and it's not working, and it's going to take some time of that not working. And hopefully, those that are aware enough to say, okay, this is we can't bring this process, we can't bring this along with us, we need to come up with something new. I really do think that the organizations that are flexible and open-minded and aware enough to let go of the, oh, well, we've always done it this way, or it needs to be X, Y, or Z, are going to be the ones that thrive.
Very, very well said. And Sara, as you know, as I stumbled upon your work, I've been very, very captivated, perhaps is the best word, by the richness of your thinking. And I've been very open about that, in our conversations and what have you. And I think just in what you've shared already, people can really experience that. I mean, you have a very rich set of thoughts that you integrate together. As you look at the journey, and this is going to be somewhat of a pointed personal kind of question, what have you learned about yourself in going and through this journey?
I mean, I've learned that moving into a new way of being or a new way of working involves a lot of change. Sometimes that's extremely uncomfortable. I think it does take a certain degree of letting go of a desire to know what it's going to look like. I like to think of it a little bit of a way, like if you think like what, way back when you talk about like, explorers setting sail out into a certain direction and they'd have an idea of where they wanted to go, but the winds often do not take, like, it doesn't go in a straight line. And, being able to have enough flexibility, enough openness, enough belief in that we can move things forward in a positive way to be able to weather those changes in direction. If I were to, this is going to be an opinion and not like necessarily an educated, it's more of an educated guess. I think that when we start to see, I really do think when we start to see the last of the boomer generation leaving the workplace, that's really when we're going to start to see this accelerate. I think we're building the foundation for it now. There's a lot of kind of like testing going on about what works and what doesn't. And that it's probably, it probably will be somewhere around maybe looking in the next kind of like 10 to 20 years or so before we really start to see this shift. But like I said, I really do think that once we get to that tipping point of that change in demographic within the workplace, that it's going to inevitably have to move to this type of model.
Excellent. And as we look at that self-determination perspective, and this is the reason I asked my question, is we're all on our journeys. How do we support each other in manifesting and helping others manifest their self-determined self, if you will?
Well, I mean, humans like autonomy. So I think that that's a positive, when you look at self, even from a psychology perspective and self-determination theory, that a lot of that, it has to do around having autonomy, like this combination of kind of like autonomy and connection. I think people want to be, particularly in leadership spaces too, want to be given an opportunity to collaborate, to be able to, be given direction, but then also have, like I said, the autonomy or feel like they're trusted to be able to execute that. I think we're going to have to get to a space, which if you spend too much time looking at the news right now, it doesn't feel like that's necessarily some of where our culture is going. But I think we're going to need to move to a space that is more collaborative, that involves a lot more conversations, that it has openness for exploration, that you can be a more kind of learning centered environment. Like part of learning is not getting it right the first time. And, if you're moving to a more kind of autonomous model, is that there's from a leadership standpoint. And I think, in a collaborative sense, that this is one of the skills that traditionally women tend to be really good at in the sort of nurturing space, is to allow for that journey of development. Because if you're going to say to somebody, this is what I want you to accomplish. Now go do it. You have to be okay that it's not that they may do it a different way, or that there may be some different iterations of that. So having, workspaces or culture in our environment that is much more collaborative, much more learning based, much more about, what it is that we are moving towards, as opposed to kind of this hierarchical or sort of top down model of management is I think going to be important. And I really think that the younger generations of workers are looking for something like that. I think there's a much more of a drive for sort of, my people of my vintage and younger that that want to feel like they're doing something that is purposeful and that they feel connected to, and I think that's going to be supported by by having a model that allows individuals to be more determinant of what their what their work arrangements look like.
Yeah. And I've always leveraged and keenly, I'll say leveraged, if you will, the Picasso's quote: "Every act of creation is first of all an act of destruction." The interesting thing is it's first an act of destruction, but you don't fixate on the destruction. You have to create the new. And part of that destruction is potentially just letting go of the old. It's not actually actively destroying it. Just letting go is an act of destruction.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's very difficult for people to embrace that. I mean, and respectfully, we say, there's a cancel culture. Well, maybe we need to embrace a creation culture versus a cancel culture.
Yeah, because I think, there's cancel culture is a whole other
different, yes.
But it certainly doesn't, that certainly doesn't support self-determination, because cancel culture is all about conformity.
Exactly.
Right. So, and God, forbid that you don't do the right thing, do it exactly right all the time, and that breeds something, something else quite different. So, letting go of that, I think, is going to be part of it, making a transition out of this somebody to blame culture. And then, you made a really good point, because it's not, the idea that you have to get rid of something in order to make space for something else is very zero sum, where it's that idea is like, oh, well, we have to get rid of this, second revolution or male dominated or whatever you want to call it, in order to make space for this other one. And it's like, it's zero sum. It's like saying that there's a pie and this is taking up too much of the pie, where, I much prefer to look at it and be like, you can bake other pies.
Yep.
Like it can be a little bit harder to get all of the ingredients together and all of those things to make your own pie, but it's certainly, it's not a limited, there's not a limited space for, for innovation. And is it easy? No, but I think if you think, we always are looking at having to undo in order to create that, and not just looking at creating and letting whatever it is that is most desirable emerge on its own, then there's a lot of energy going in places that could definitely be better applied elsewhere.
And definitively embracing an abundance mentality, an abundance mindset.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So it's really like, because that zero sum, like you said, you have to destroy something to make room for something else, is very scarcity based, rather than just saying like, well, let that thing be what it is. I'm going to go make something else over here and people can choose.
Exactly. So, exactly. My good friend, I want to respect your time, but I've got one more question, if you will, in the time that we have you. If you could say anything to, one key message, if you will, to leaders across the world and organizations, what would your wisdom offer?
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, you wanted to end it with a small question. Thanks.
You know me quite well, Sara.
Yeah, I know. And I think it's like, really have patience. There's a lot of reason to be positive. I think when we get to a space where there is going to be this massive shift. There's a desire to push it forward faster than it needs to go, like to push it forward rather than just letting it emerge on its own. And so when I say, have patience, I don't mean not to do anything, but that, we may sometimes what you desire will emerge on its own without your intervention. Like we are on a pathway to getting to this place. And not to I think we kind of, to be honest with you, need to get out of our own way sometimes. To this, I know humans like to be in action. We like to be like, oh, I've got to do something about this. And I really do think this is a situation where it's like we are moving along the right trajectory. So, continue moving on that path. Like, let's not get in our own way on this one, and trust in what is possible for the future.
Well said. Well said, as always. And again, how much I appreciate the complexity of thought, the richness of thought is what I mean, and the way that you offer it. Any parting words before we sign off, my friend?
Like I said, I think it's just, this is a matter of, trusting that we are on the way to where we need to be.
Very well said. Very well said. Thank you so much, Sara, for making the time. And we hope that folks will likewise join us on the 13th and for more great conversation. But thank you. Gratitude for all the time you've made.
Great. Thanks, Sai.
Thank you.